Let's take a look at a game from the 1994 quarterfinals of the Candidates Tournament. The white pieces were played by Boris Gulko. Boris Gulko, by the way, is the only person to have won both the Soviet Chess Championship as well as the United States Chess Championship. The black pieces were played by Nigel Short, who was once the third highest rated player on the planet back in 1988 and part of 1989. And he also played a world championship match against Garry Kasparov in 1993. So let's see how these players handle the game. d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3 does invite the Nimzo Indian defense, but Short goes for d5 and transposes to a Queen's Gambit declined. Okay, white goes for the exchange variation and then plays bishop to g5. Now the main line continues with bishop to e7 here, but Short is going to prioritize getting his light squared bishop to f5 as soon as possible. He can't do it just yet though, because of the move queen to b3, which would fork these two pawns. So Short prepares it with the move c6 to guard the d5 pawn. Now white can play queen to c2 to stop bishop to f5 in this position, but here's another option. White can play e3, preparing to meet bishop to f5 with queen to f3. And this is the line I want to take a look at. So the point of this way of playing is to get this bishop to move out of the way and then take twice on f6 and ruin the kingside pawn structure, which is what happens. Bishop to g6, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, queen takes queen, pawn takes queen. So white's given up the bishop pair in this opening, but black has a terrible pawn structure over here. He has doubled isolated f-pawns, and he does have an isolated h-pawn as well. However, these pawns are not easy to attack. One of the reasons they're not easy to attack is there are no open files over here on the king side. So these rooks won't be able to get into the action and hit these pawns down the files. So black is pretty safe in this position. Now, one of white's plans in the position is to neutralize this light squared bishop by playing bishop to d3 after preparing it, and to occupy the f5 square with a knight. So the f5 square is an excellent outpost for a knight. It can't be driven away by a pawn. So for example, this king's knight can get to there in a couple different ways, like that, or like that. Meanwhile, black is going to try to get this knight to the d6 square. And from the d6 square, that would protect f5. It also has the option of jumping into an outpost on c4 or e4. And that black knight can get to d6 in 4 moves, perhaps like this. So let's see how things play out. So white goes for king to d2. Kind of a strange move, but when the queens are off the board, castling isn't so important. And king to d2 does support bishop to d3. So that's the point of the move. Knight d7, bishop d3, knight b6, getting closer to the d6 square. b3, a prophylactic move, stopping the knight from coming into c4. Bishop to a3, taking advantage of the dark squared weakness, potentially coming to b2 at some point. Knight ge2, planning on making a journey to f5. King to d7, getting the king up, connecting the rooks. Knight to g3. Knight c8, heading for d6, as we mentioned. h4, trying to harass this light squared bishop. Knight d6, landing on the ideal defensive square, keeping white's knight off of f5, or threatening to exchange it if it lands there. h5 forces black to trade bishops. And then bishop to b2. Short probably reasoned that his bishop isn't really seeing any action and won't get into the game for some time, doesn't have a role to play, whereas this knight can get into the game maybe by going to e2 and f4 and playing on the king side. So Short decides to trade his bishop for that c3 knight. Now rook h to g8, and so this is one benefit of this ruined pawn structure, is black does have this half-open g file to work with, and white doesn't have any good files for his rooks at this point. King d3, coming back to the king side. a5, a4 stops that advance. f5, protected by the knight on d6. Also, this makes a nice anchor point here on e4, so black is intending to post his knight on e4. And so white plays rook to h2, and the purpose of this is to guard the g2 square in case this knight needs to move away. Then rook to e4, which threatens the f2 pawn, and it also threatens to capture twice on g3 and win a pawn. So white has little choice. He has to trade knights, and that fixes the black pawn structure, and the king comes to e2, and then f5 expanding, f3, king e6, rook f1. The f file might become open soon. Rook to g3, planning to double the rooks on the g file. F takes e4, f takes e4, so white does have that open f file now. Okay, rook to f4, and black doubles his rooks. Also threatens the g2 pawn, so the king comes over to protect. And then h6 is played, and the players agree to a draw in this position. Nigel Short did go on to win that quarterfinal match against Gulko in the tiebreakers, in rapid tiebreakers. All right, thanks for watching the video.